Let's see a Pikachu in the back.
Pikachu? I mean, that's heavy on the ethics. Right? Pikachu. Well, what is the ethics of capturing small animals in order to fight for you?
That doesn't sound very good, does it? You just ruined my childhood.
Yeah, right, exactly. That's the whole thing is, I'm going to enslave this animal and force it to fight to the death.
Maybe we should talk about that. Maybe we should talk about that. That's a pretty good topic. Do you think that Pokemon is unethical? Capturing Pokemon?
Of course. I just laid it out. I mean, you are capturing small animals against their will and forcing them to fight, well, maybe not to the death, but to exhaustion and conceively the death.
I'm going to try and argue
for your entertainment.
I'm going to try and argue for
Are you for Pokemon
enslavement?
Okay. So, you're in favor of Pokemon enslavement. This is going to be great.
What if it gives me a lot of pleasure?
Well, that's fantastic. You know what? Stomping on small children is pleasurable to me. Is that good?
Okay. And we're going to imagine a world in which Pokemon exist.
Imagine a world in which Pokemon exist.
Yes. And what we're doing is we're capturing them and forcing them to fight.
Okay.
Do you think there's any ethical issue with doing that?
The ethical issue is with the word forcing them to fight. I like a good fight, but if you're forcing people to fight, I don't think that's quite ethical, yeah.
What if I was to say to you that I really enjoyed watching it? It gave me a lot of pleasure.
Well, lots of things give me pleasure, but I don't need to force people to do it.
Right. So just because we get pleasure from something...
I like watching Asian girls each other, but I don't force them to do it, do you know what I mean? Yeah, so...
Do you think there's anything ethically wrong with capturing these Pokemon and forcing them to fight?
Yeah, I do, actually. I mean, I have a problem with getting any kind of animal to be viciously nurtured to be that way, because it's suffering for them, actually. For them to want to attack people, it's probably the fact that they may feel threatened, because like humans, they have a brain, so they can think for themselves.
What if, rather than capturing them, we bred them into existence?
Well, okay. Now you're getting into the whole meat concept, and the answer is yes, of course. If it is for survival, yes. Crossing the line in a bit of like I prefer red meat in order to in other the vegetable products. Okay, here's the difference. Pokemon are semi-sentient creatures. If not sentient, they have like actual conversations with these animals. Further, we also know that dog fighting and other things like that, we take that right out. For some reason, pleasure of eating, say, food, whether it be red meat, fish, snails, or like in the case of the Romans, peacock tongues, which seems incredibly wasteful. That seems to be okay, mostly because we're actually using it for our ingestion, and we are omnivores. I mean, at some level, we are killing other animals every breath, right? Like, at what level are you getting to? Down to bacteria?
If you bring in the thing is, if they were only, I always say this: if you were only alive, and the only reason you were alive is so you could have a fight, would you wish that you weren't alive? You would cherish being alive, I think, even if you knew it was going to be a grimy, gruesome ending. So I think you would cherish being alive for a little bit.
What's your opinion on dogfighting then?
Absolutely against it, yeah.
But do you not think that because they're alive for that purpose, does that make it ethical?
How many dogs are built for bred for dogfighting? No, there are other ways to breed dogs.
Do you think that sensory pleasure can ever justify a violent behaviour?
I mean, sometimes I think violence is necessary. If someone tries to attack you or...
But self-defense, I guess, is different to just purely for pleasure.
I wouldn't do it for pleasure because that's not my kind of person, no. And I mean, but I'm not going to go around judging people either.
From a fundamental level, as a moralist, I do actually recognize the concept of vegetarianism and veganism as kind of like morally more right.
Morally virtuous.
Morally virtuous.
You don't see it as an obligation.
Correct.
Okay.
Exactly. It's virtuous, not an obligation. Part of that is because I love red meat, or I love fish, and I love this. And once you say no animal, at what level are we talking about?
But
we can certainly say fish, like snails.
Surely,
like on snails. You know?
Surely the fact that you get pleasure from eating meat is irrelevant to whether the act is moral. Because I said that to you before about Pokemon, and you said, "What if I like stomping babies?"
Correct.
So if I like stomping babies, it doesn't make stomping babies more ethical.
No.
So if you like eating red meat, does that make killing animals more ethical?
No.
Thousands of years of human evolution that we like eating meat, and there's certain vitamins and whatnot that you can't get from vegetables and stuff. So we do actually need it to a certain extent, and it's cheaper and more easy. If you're a working class family, it's going to be a lot harder to function as a vegan family, I think, yeah.
Do you think there are any nutrients that we can't get from plants
Is
that
it
we...
B12 or something like that?
Yeah, so B12 vegans generally take a supplement.
Yeah.
If we can take the supplement and not be deficient, does that mean it's unnecessary to kill the animals?
I definitely think in about 3-4 generations we're all going to be vegan.
Let's say if rather than forcing them to fight, we were eating them for food. Do you see any ethical issue with that?
If you had to eat them to survive, maybe no, because after all we have to survive. But if there's no need to eat them and they can just roam, no. It's like I understand people eat meat, and so do I. But I feel like as many animals we can save, the better.
It's morally virtuous, but not an obligation.
What does it take for something to be an obligation?
I
I know it's a tough question. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean,
let's-
now you're delving into the meaning of self and like where your dividing line becomes in terms of yourself versus society. Because if you blend yourself completely into society, then your moral obligation becomes absolute to the point that you're no longer deriving positive use for the total society. But clearly we know as an independent thinking species that the mix of the individual is far greater positive dynamic than blending everybody into one giant grey mush.
I think it is kind of like the circle of life.
Yeah.
I think we as humans have only now got to the stage in our evolution where we're able to not eat meat. So I do think
Let's say
we do have an ethical responsibility, I think, to be better than animals, I suppose. You
Right.
made me think, yeah.
Right.
I do actually believe that now, you made me think.
For as much as I can understand some people wanting to allow animals to live, you shouldn't force it down people's throats either, because then it takes away their democracy.
Do you think that, I guess, imagine two issues. So one, we've got like a preachy vegan who's like forcing their opinion down someone's throat. And in another scenario, we've got someone who is forcing knives into the throats of animals. Which would you see as a bigger ethical issue out of those two options?
Both are equally as bad.
Really?
I'd say so. I mean,
Let's put it in a human context then. So I'm forcing my opinion down a human's throat, or I'm slitting a human's throat. Which is more of an ethical issue?
that's not even comparable.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, if you're slitting someone's throat, they're not even on the same level. You can't compare those. I don't think. I mean, one's attempted murder, the other is an opinion. I mean, I don't agree with forcing your opinion down other people's throats and taking away their democracy. But it's not on the same level as going around slitting people's mouths.
Right.
I mean,
So then in the animal context then, what's different there? So we could be forcing an opinion down a human's throat or slitting an animal's throat, which is a bigger issue for you.
well, I think slitting. I mean, it's unfortunate that people slit animals' throats.
Yeah, the stigma of vegan and vegetarian food being pretty rank. Yeah, well, not rank, but just unsatisfying, yeah.
But when it comes to Pokemon, you don't think that the sensory pleasure can justify violence?
I don't understand what you call Pokemon. I understand it's a good way to lead into this conversation, but to bring it up now,
Yeah.
Pokemon doesn't exist.
I know, but my point is you don't think that sensory pleasure justifies violence to them. So does the taste pleasure we get from eating meat, or the lack of pleasure from eating vegan, justify the violence to the animals that we
There's
eat?
a cognitive dissonance between the way we think about eating meat and actually think about killing an animal.
Absolutely, yeah.
It just seems to be nature, and I don't think you could check. I mean, it developed for a reason. At one time, we needed to survive, so you can't take away an intrinsic part of our genetic, of our natural makeup. I mean,
Do you think there's a difference between what's natural and what's moral?
yeah, I do. To prevent some of the natural mechanisms from taking over, you need morality.
And do you think just because something's always happened in our evolutionary past, does that make it ethical to do so today?
Not necessarily. I mean, you could define morals however you want.
But for you,
For me, I don't mind eating meat.
you don't mind eating meat.
I like it. So
But do you think that sensory pleasure can justify violence?
it's not me doing it. So I don't. I mean, I get your point. This isn't like. This is neutral, right? This is like what is the channel?
My parents have farms and whatnot, and they do actually kill a chicken before eating it and whatnot, and it's gruesome to watch. And when you see the mechanics of it, they grab it, right, hold down the wings, slit its throat, kill it, and it's...
Your argument is based. would be correct if we were actually going out and killing them and then we eat it. But most of us don't actually eat them.
But is there any moral difference between killing them myself or paying someone else to kill them for me?
I'm not even paying someone else to kill. So I'm paying. If I go and buy meat, I'm paying. Let's say Tesco, or a butcher.
Yeah.
They bought the meat from someone else.
Yes.
So effectively, there's about 3 levels down the chain before anyone gets paid.
But if people didn't buy the product, then that process wouldn't exist. You're paying for the process of how they make the product.
Essentially, you are. But I don't know how to explain. I just like to eat meat.
I understand that. I love the taste of it as well. But do you think that sensory pleasure is a good enough justification? If I like dogfighting, would that make dogfighting moral?
It might not be moral to you, but to someone else it is.
But would it be to you?
Not to me, it wouldn't. But if someone else finds fun in it, and for whatever reason, then they can do it. I mean.
So, okay, what if someone got a lot of pleasure from raping women? Would that be ethical if they enjoyed it?
I wouldn't say that's ethical at all.
Right. And you wouldn't say it's ethical to go to dogfights either, even if they enjoy it?
Well, I mean, rape.
Let's put it in human context. So say killing humans for food, or treating them really badly, torturing them.
Yeah.
Would it be an obligation not to do that?
Well, let's actually bring up a great point. Like, so let's say we allow 2 boxers to fight one another, where death is a possibility, but they're self-selected, and we don't expect death. Death is not the point, right? That is like very, very light gray, even though it's for our entertainment. They're self-choosing, and we're not expecting them to die. Now we're going to take 2 individuals off of death row. We're going to do death race 2000 with them or something like that.
Think of it this way. Imagine if the animal was the top of the food chain and it wanted to eat, and we were, let's say, the mouse or the smaller animal. It would kill us out of its own instincts.
But do you think that we should use other animals as role models for our behaviour?
Not necessarily, no.
So if a lion eats their own baby, eats their runt, would that make it ethical for me to eat my own baby?
Okay, we don't. I need to go.
Oh, no worries. I'll give you a card if you're interested. If you watch one thing on this card, there's something called The Best Speech You'll Ever Hear. I watched that at a university lecture. I watched that a few years ago. It changed my life. So I really recommend it. Thank you so much for the conversation. I appreciate I'm putting you on the spot.
Come on, ladies. Come on. Come on. Come on.
He just assaulted that woman. This is top quality entertainment.